Okay, so now we have a couple of examples, some word examples here, word problems, and these are, of course, simple things. I mean, nothing complicated about them, but they are useful and valuable in that they link your understanding of addition to essentially to word problems and to different situations. So essentially, I mean, especially in learning math, I mean, I know this about mathematics very well, that you need to make as many connections in your mind as possible when you learn about something. Any sort of concept, when you learn about it, you need to make as many connections as possible in your mind, and then you can use that concept for as many types of situations as possible, basically. Okay, so for example, over here we have Raghav has 4 shells and Sarita has 5 shells. So Raghav 4 shells, Sarita 5 shells. How many shells do they have in essentially all together? So of course, when you have 4 shells over here and 5 shells over here, of course you will put them together, and then you will start counting, meaning that you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So you have 9 shells together. And of course, in order to do this operation, you can use any of the models that we have. For example, you can use the beads model. For example, you have essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are basically 5 shells. These are basically 4 shells. You put them together. What you will have is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So then you will have this number of shells together. And then you can count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So you have 9 shells all together, right? The same operation you can use a Ginlari, for example. On a Ginlari, you would basically you have basically, let's say that this is a Ginlari. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, for example. I have essentially 10 beads on the string, right? So then when I want to calculate 5 plus 4, what I will do is that basically I put 5 of these beads to the other side. I move them to the other side, and then 4 of the beads again to the other side, right? So then I have essentially all of these beads all the way up to here to one side, which is essentially the same thing that you would do on an abacus. On an abacus, you just keep moving these beads up and down, or essentially to the up and down, basically, and then you will count them, of course. So then now these beads, we have put them to the side, and then we have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, which means that 5 plus 4 is equal to 9, basically, right? You can use basically the number strip method. On the number strip method, you have essentially all of these numbers. So you have basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, for example, right? And then a 5 would be a jump from 1 to 5. Now, one thing which is important to note here is that, suppose that you want to do this operation, which is basically 5 plus a 4, right? Now, what you need to take into consideration is that from the beginning of the number strip, you're starting from 1. You're not starting from 0, right? Since you're starting from 1, when you want to do it, so of course you have to do the operation step by step, meaning that there is 5 plus a 4. So a 5 would be essentially, of course, you have to essentially move from 1 to essentially a 5, right? So now this would be essentially a jump of 1, 2, 3, and 4 steps. This is 4 steps, or essentially jumps, right? 4 steps or jumps basically. And the reason, and then basically once you want to do essentially this part of the operation plus 4, you will start from here, and then you have to do essentially, you need to essentially to jump basically, and you need to go 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Because essentially when you want to have essentially for the first part of the operation, a 5 would be essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 beats over here. And then for a 4, for the second part of the operation, normally essentially what you would do is that you would add essentially 4 beats to the total number of beats that you have. So then you would add essentially 4 beats over here, and then if you count, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So essentially the whole thing would be basically 9 beats. So the exact same thing that you need to do over here, meaning that you need to essentially add essentially 4 beats to the total number of beats that you have. So essentially when you do essentially the first part, which is a 5, you will end up right over here, right? You will end up right over here. And then you need to add 4 beats. Now each of these numbers represents essentially 1 beat, right? So then a 6 would be 1 beat, a 7 would be 1 beat, an 8 would be 1 beat, and 9 essentially would be an additional beat, basically. So of course then you will end up essentially at 9, right? Which means that you will do 1, 2, 3, and 4 jumps to get to here, right? Now if you paid attention to what happened here, is that for the second part of the operation, we made essentially 4 jumps to essentially for a number 4, right? For the first part of the operation, for a number 5, we did essentially again 4 jumps, not 5 jumps, right? And the reason for the anomaly in the first part of the operation is that basically you start essentially we have started from a 1 on the number strip, not from a 0. If we had started from a 0, then we would have essentially 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, and 10, for example, right? We would have, if we had this type of number strip, then essentially for the same operation 5 plus 4, we would have done 5 jumps for 5 and 4 jumps for 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps for, this is 5 jumps, 5 jumps all the way up to here. And then basically we need to do, and then basically we need to do 4 jumps for 4. So then 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that would be 4 jumps, and then we will get to 9, right? So then that means that essentially 5 plus a 4 is equal to 9, right? So but for now, our number strip is going to be starting from a 1. So if you take this into consideration, you're not going to come across any problems, at least logical problems, which means that essentially when you want to do some addition on the number strip, when you have something like 5 plus a 4 for the first number, you will jump to that number, right? Not the same number of jumps, but you will simply jump to that number, meaning that you will essentially for a 5, you will just simply jump to 5, right? which would be essentially in practically would be only 4 steps. You will find to jump, you will jump to 5, and then for a 4 you will do essentially 4 jumps, the same number of jumps as the number itself. So that would be 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you will end up at this number. That would be essentially the operation itself, right? And that's, I suppose, all the different ways that you can do addition, if I'm not mistaken. Now let's take a look here. When we talked about basically all of these different models that we can use for addition, we used basically essentially the number of children, or essentially put the children together, which would be essentially the beads model itself that we talked about. For example, you can substitute each of these children with 1 bead basically to make it more general basically. Or the number of pencils would be essentially the same beads model. Or the number of balls would be the same beads model. The number of stones would be the same beads model, right? The number of fingers would be again the same beads model, right? And dice would be again the same beads model. So, and then we have the ginlari, the counting string would be again beads on a string. That's the same thing basically, which is the same as the abacus. So we are going to end up with the beads itself. Or essentially we have the number strip. So we have essentially 2 main models that we can essentially, so far we have actually come up with 2 main general purpose models for addition. One of them is the beads. You can keep them loose, or you can put them on a string, or you can put them on a rod in a abacus, same thing. Or essentially you can use the number strip, okay? And for now, you just need to keep in mind that our number strip starts from a 1, not from a 0. So yeah, you need to be careful about the number of jumps that you make in the beginning of the operation, okay? So that's basically all about that. Now let's go through a couple more of these examples. It says that, for example, Rajit has 3 marbles and Meenakshi has 6 marbles. How many marbles do they have in total? So 3 marbles plus 6 marbles would be again an example of addition. So 3 plus 6, you could use any of those models and you would have 9, for example, marbles. 3 coconuts and 4 coconuts together make essentially 7 coconuts, and these are again the same type of thing. For example, I have 2 books in my bag. My friend has, for example, 5 books in his bag. In total, we have, for example, 2 plus 5, which is equal to 7 books in our bags, basically. That's basically all about that. Okay. So now in the next video, we will talk about a simple model for subtraction. Thank you.